So hello friends, today we're going to compare two lenses that I really like a lot. So let me introduce them. The first lens is the Nikkor 85mm 1.4. Fantastic lens. And then we have here the less known but also very good Nikkor 85mm f2. So what we're going to do with them is to compare them. So we'll check at the images they produce just after. Right now let's just talk about the construction of these lenses. So in terms of construction, I think there isn't much to say. Both lenses are of the series AI and AS versions of Nikon lenses. This was made in the 70s, 80s and probably beginning of 90s, and then these lenses are pure metal and then made to last forever, so that's a really good thing. Main difference between them will be probably this size, as you can see. So before going further into the size, another main difference here, the 1.4 has 9 blades for the diaphragm. Here we have 7. Okay, so that's one difference. And then let's go back to the size. So I think the choice of whether lens you will use, it will depend a bit on what you can carry. So if you want to bother with a really large lens to gain one stop of light, or travel light and losing one stop of light. So okay, that's a choice that you have to do. But then just for the sake of it, I took this kitchen scale and then let's just weight the lens. Okay, go to 0. Okay, and you aren't seeing the numbers. Okay, 0. Okay, and we have 527 grams for the 1.4, and then here 266. So half the weight. So that will be already a very good argument for taking the small lens, especially for going on vacation and kind of stuff like that. But then for me it is always a hard choice deciding where to take. So to help you with that, and since there isn't much more to say about how the lenses are made, let's go to the comparisons. To start the comparisons, we'll start by checking what these lenses are capable of doing at the minimum focus and distance they can produce. For both lenses it is 85 centimeters or 0.85 meters or 3 feet for the people who count in feet. And then here we have the 85mm 1.4, and then here obviously we have the 85mm f2, and then we're seeing the images these lenses can provide each at the largest aperture they have. So I proceed as usual. I took my lens calibration target, so I was able to get the best possible focusing, so we're able to compare the images. I put some colorful items here, some film, this small statue my daughter made a few years ago, and then a lamp on the background, so we can have a nice impression of the bokeh these lenses can produce. So here obviously the 1.4 has a really nice bokeh, whereas here the f2 is a bit poor, but that's for obvious reasons. And then here we can see the transition from the sharp to bokeh of fuzzy parts is really smooth and nicely, whereas here it's a bit bit hard, I would say. Okay, so about color rendition, both lenses seem to produce really nice colors, with the 1.4 having an edge on the color, I would say. So, and then in terms of sharpness, let's take a look. So here we have two images. Here we are at 100%, and then we're looking at images made with a Nikon Z7 camera, so we can zoom a lot. So this thing is really big, and then as expected the 1.4 just now is a bit soft, and then the f2 has obviously an edge over the 1.4 because of the aperture. So to proceed to true comparisons, so what I'm going to do now is to move the 1.4 to f2, and then here you see immediately the change, and then we can see that the 1.4 gets quite sharp, and then very little aberrations here, well, maybe here, but then here we can see that the black moves toward the red immediately, and then the sharpness is quite good, a bit everywhere. So if we take a closer look, okay, now let's get a bit away to look at this. So colors, really nice, bokeh, bubbles still are big on the 1.4, even though we are exactly the same aperture. Now colors, really nice for both lenses, and then here there is something you need to notice, and then this is going to be on the sharpness. This part here looks a bit less sharp, but then this is something you need to understand on lenses, and then this is related to the optical recipe, and then you can see it immediately here. You can see that the f2 is going to produce some front depth of field, because you can see it goes sharp almost to 5 millimeters, whereas here, well, we can say almost the same, but not quite. If we get close, we can see that this thing gets fuzzy quicker, whereas here we can see the thin line still. Okay, so far so good. Both lenses behave very good, with a very small difference in color, but then the general rendition of both lenses is extremely good, with probably some flare that is appearing here for the 1.4, but then the flare thing, you either like it or not. This is something really a matter of choice, but you have to be aware that if you put your 1.4 towards a strong light, you will see some flare. Okay, let's jump to 2.8 to keep going with our comparison, and then still the 1.4 has quite an edge, I would say, on the colors. At least myself, I like it. They are just a bit warmer. We have still this flare that is appearing, and then if we take a closer look to the sharpness, we see that both lenses are behaving quite well, with the advantage of the f2 having some frontal depth of field, so this is going to give a small advantage, and then here the 1.4 has little frontal depth of field, is more towards the back, and then you can see it's a bit sharper here, and then maybe going up to here to 8 millimeters, whereas here, well, quite equivalent, I would say. But then here, for example, you can see these specks of dust that here you can barely see. So first thing, 1.4 has depth of field towards the back, f2 has a centered depth of field, and then this you can see it here on the film boxes. Well, on this film here you can see it. It is a bit sharp here, not really a lot, but then you can see that towards the back both appear quite sharp, but then here you have a bit more contrast, and then here on the writings on this film here you can immediately see the difference. Here the text appears more clear and sharper, but if we go down here we can see that the text goes towards the deep for the 1.4. Okay, but so far not really a big difference between these two lenses, but behave really good. Maybe a last glance to this small statue that my daughter made that is full of color, and then here we are also towards the corner of the image, and then you can see here that the f2 is getting a bit soft on the corner, whereas here the 1.4 is quite constant, I would say. And then we can double check that here on the text. This is the other corner of the image, and then you can see it here. Text is clear. Here we have some spherical aberration. So this is one advantage, I would say, for the 1.4. Okay, we jump to f4 but lenses. Now I would say I start to see less and less difference. Maybe again, if we go back to the color rendition, we can see that the 1.4 is rendering the colors a bit more deep and then at the same time warmer. I don't know how to explain this, but then you can see the yellow. It's a bit more yellow, and then here the general image looks darker at the same time, whereas here there's a kind of glow, maybe spherical aberration. And then again we come to check this small statue. Let's go a bit back, and then you can see all the small cracks that had appeared with time. They look quite good in both lenses, but then the 1.4 here has more details, and then, as I told you before, the resolution in the corner gets a bit poor. But then the f2, if we move towards the center of the image, we can see that the f2 is not bad at all, and then the proof is here. The 85 f2 in the center is quite good, I would say equivalent to the 1.4. Here we start at f4, so we start seeing these specks of dust that we were not seeing before on the f2. And then, just for the sake of completeness, we move here to the corner, and then we can see that the f2 has improved quite a lot. Let's go back. Let's jump at 5.6 in both lenses. So the images have gotten quite equivalent. We still have the flare, which as we close down the lens, it's starting to get a bit uglier. So this you absolutely need to be aware. For the 1.4 you're going to get flare, but then on the other hand you will get some nicer colors, I will have to say. Well, the difference is minimal anyway, but then and then a bokeh, which is a bit more creamy, I would say. Okay, so I cannot tell you more about the difference. You can see it by yourself. So what I'm going to do is just get the image here, and then I will span it. So you can see the difference yourself. And then if we do the same experiment again at f8, this fading, still the 1.4 has a small edge on sharpness towards the edge, but then as we move closer to the center, I will have to say I get the impression the f2 is a bit better on the center, poor on the corners, whereas the 1.4 has a quite a uniform behavior all through the frame. Is this important to you or not? It's up to you to decide. Okay, so this is all for the close focusing comparison. Now we're going to move to a distance comparison. So see you in a few seconds. Here we are ready for the second set of comparisons. As before, we have here the 1.4 at 1.4, here the f2 at f2, and these are the maximum apertures you can reach with each of these lenses. Okay, so here we have this image. it is quite obvious that they were taken at a distance. We were probably 50 to 80 meters away from this church. There is actually a small park here, and then I was there with my daughter. She was playing, I was making these pictures, and then I made the focusing point to be in the clock, which gives quite nice contrast. And then let's just talk about these images. First thing I have to say, here I'm totally honest, I prefer the image taken with the 1.4 because I like this kind of front ground, like everything is out of focus, and then it gives the feeling like things are like popping out of the screen. You have these things out of focus, and then the church, the subject, which is in focus, quite nice. And then with the f2, things are a bit out of focus, but then you don't get that effect. Things look a bit flat, even though the image looks good. Anyway, you can see it here. Things are sharp, and then there's nice color rendition, which I would say is quite equivalent in both lenses. Probably here greens are a bit more green. I don't know how to say that. Okay, and then let's look at the focusing point, and then here you are. Main difference as before, as expected. The 1.4 looks a bit soft, wide open, but it is not unsharp. It is actually the spherical aberration which is creating this kind of glow, but then all the details are there, as you can see here. But since we're doing a comparison, let's do this comparison, and then here we have the 1.4 which move to f2, and then now we can do comparisons. But then I don't think I even need to comment on this image. You can see the image, the difference straight away between both clocks. Here is nice, contrasty, fantastic. Here is also okay, but then you will need to do some contrast in post-processing. Okay, and then if we look further away, image looks quite the same. This tower here looks quite contrasty, and then trees are starting to look quite equivalent, but not really. Here we have, as before, this phenomena of the f2 having front and back depth of field, whereas the 1.4 has pure back depth of field. Well, there is also a little front, but not really a lot. Let's go away on the image, and then we should be maybe equivalent with both of them, and then we are a bit equivalent. But even though image got a bit sharper, I have to say we still have this kind of popping effect due to this small difference in depth of field that makes that the front is still a bit more fuzzier on the 1.4 than in the f2. There was something else I wanted to show you here, and then this is important too for you to see. There is a lot of chromatic aberration on the 1.4. You can see it here on these strong contrast zones. There is a lot of red there, and then the f2 has it as well, but it's probably better controlled. And then on both images we have nice details. Here we're looking at the top of the image, again towards the edges. The f2 is having trouble keeping good details, but then in all cases both images look really good. Okay, so let's jump to 2.8, and then here we are. Things are getting in focus really quick. We can probably start seeing some stuff here, probably this tree. The rendition is quite good with both lenses, but again we have to be honest, the 1.4 has really an edge here. If we move towards the church to the door, and then we go up to check the time, we see that the images are quite equivalent, I have to say. We saw before that the 1.4 is just a bit sharper, but then I have to say the f2 has nothing to envy to the 1.4, and then, as I told you before, the f2, it is actually very good towards the center of the image where we did the focusing, and then this is the proof. There is a lot of details here, probably maybe more, but that might be also due to the color rendition. And then let's see what's going on with the chromatic aberration. Okay, we can see that the 1.4 still has it a bit stronger, but anyway, both images look good. And then towards the edge of the image, the 1.4 remains a bit constant. Okay, so let's jump. Let's go to the clock, and then let's jump to f4. Okay, now this is interesting. The f2 at f4 looks really good. At a distance, I have to say it is maybe sharper than the 1.4. We have the opposite just before. The 1.4 was sharper at 2.8. At f4 we have a clear winner here. See those details. Wow, these are great. Okay, at least in church, and then we see that the 1.4 has better details on the trees, and then this is probably related to the fact that we have the front and let's say the centered depth field for the f2, and then just back depth field for the 1.4, and then we see that clearly here. The background looks fantastic here, and then here we have just a small lack of sharpness, but nothing really critical. And then here on the trees as before, both images are a bit equivalent, I have to say. Now let's jump to 5.6. Things are only improving. Okay, check those details. Both images look fantastic. I don't think I can find a difference anymore. Both look fantastic. Color rendition is a bit different. You can see that here on the stones, but nothing really critical. Let's go to our clock. Here on the window, both look same, I have to say. Clock here looks same, with the 1.4 maybe being a bit more warmer in colors, but in all respects they look exactly the same. So let's probably go here to the corners, check the details here on the roof. You have the bumps. Yeah, wow, this is great. And then chromatic aberration is gone in both lenses. This is also great. Look at all those details. At a distance they are fantastic. Okay, let's just go to f8, but honestly I don't expect any difference here. Here you go. What else can I say? Making a comparison from this point here is absolutely pointless. Both images look simply great. Look here, the cracks, everything. The clock. You have all the details. The trees here. Again, the stone. The trees on the back. But look great. And then let's go back. Check from a distance. Yeah, the images are the same. There isn't much I can say anymore. Okay, so this is all I wanted to show you today. Two great lenses. There is just slight difference between both of them, with the 1.4 being slightly sharper than the f2. It has some flare issues, but then is it really an issue? Because flare, as I told you before, you either like it or not. But then the f2 has also some advantages. First one, it is like a third of the price of the 1.4. It is half the weight. There is only one stop of light difference. As you just saw, that only matters if you're really in low light, if you're going to shoot at f2, 2.8, f4, whatever. Both images look fantastic. And then you just saw that the 85 at f4 at a distance here is just a fantastic lens. So I think this is all. This is all I wanted to tell you today. Thanks for watching and see you next time.